It's probably got cut off, but the top says 4-6. We're talking about the quadratic formula and the discriminant. So you need to know the quadratic formula. It's not an option. It doesn't go away. Sometimes on standardized tests like ISTEP or whatever, they'll give it to you, and sometimes they don't. I don't know what year they're doing it. So you need to know it because you need to. But it also just makes these problems a lot quicker if you have it memorized instead of just like looking off of mind all the time. So the quadratic formula is that x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Do you guys remember the video I showed you last year? Did I show it to you? Why is my computer not working? So hopefully someone in your life sang this to you at some point.
No, thanks.
I'm pretty sure I did last year. I'm not doing it again, but
I remember Sarah singing it to me, but I've never seen it.
this is my favorite video in my life. Did I show this to you last year? I didn't? Oh. I must not have liked you yet. That's me and a couple of my friends.
I was going to say, is it really?
ABC, the letters you need to make it easy. That's how. No more, no more. No more. That's how. No more. Look at me. What's a minus? What's a minus? The square root of b squared minus 4ac. All over 2a. All over 2a. All over.
Okay, so if you feel like making a better one, that would be an excellent extra credit project.
I cannot wait to I'm in the car with my mom.
So that's really what I wanted these extra credit projects to be, not necessarily that. And I know it's corny and I know you guys want to make fun of it, but honestly, like, I love it. But something that helps you remember something is what I want. I don't just want a triangle that you slapped on a poster. It's fine, but that's not what I want. That's not what you did. What I want is something that will help somebody. So the quadratic formula you have to know, and obviously you didn't remember it. So if you can come up with a song, a rap, a poem, what's it called where like FOIL stands for first, Saturday, and last? What's that called? Acronym, yeah. So if you have something like that to help people with something in this class, not necessarily quadratic formula, that's what I'm really looking for, okay? So not the point for today, but however you can remember it is what I want for you, okay? So maybe that'll help you. I don't know. So anyway, we have a formula. We have to know it, not an option, okay? The quadratic formula, I want you to write down that it works every time. And when I say that, what I mean is whenever you have x squared blah, 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 it works every time with that. So eventually we're going to get to like x to the 4. That's not what I'm saying. So if you haven't noticed by now, sometimes we factor and it doesn't factor, right? Well, no solution is no longer an option. So if it doesn't factor, this is typically what you would go to next. So I've told you before, if you can't factor it within like a minute, I go to the quadratic formula and just solve it that way. So yeah, it works every time. You could use it every single time if you want to, but you're going to find out that like if you can avoid it, you want to. It's really easy to mess it up. It's an easy thing to do, but if you miss like a negative somewhere, you already got it wrong, and that's not fun, okay? So I'm going to go to the discriminant when we need it. We don't need it just yet. Number 15, solve using the quadratic formula. You know by now, I don't care how you solve anything. You can solve any way you want to, but I'm going to save you some time. These aren't going to factor in a way that's helpful to us today, so we're going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula, plus we need to practice with it anyway. I know you're going to be tempted to work ahead because you actually do remember this better than you think, but the problem is I think sometimes you guys do some steps wrong and you've had it memorized wrong, so don't work ahead of me today. Look at me. Sarah, you're writing stuff. Don't work ahead of me today because you have it memorized possibly wrong, and it's easier to fix it if you don't memorize it wrong. I don't know if I made sense just then, but we'll pretend I did. What number is this, 15? And it says 4x squared minus 6 equals negative 12x. Is that right? I can't see it. Thank you. Okay, so why is this weird? It's in the wrong order, and it's not equal to 0. So let's talk about why we want that to happen. Whenever they say solve with an x squared, what would that be if I were graphing the thing? What shape would I have if I'm graphing it? A U, a parabola. That's what we're talking about the whole chapter, by the way. So if they say solve it, that's where it crosses the x-axis. So if it crosses the x-axis, to find the x-intercept, you set y to 0. So don't I want y to be equal to 0? That's why. This whole chapter is all connected. I know it's really hard for you to see that connection, so I'm trying to bring it in wherever I can. So we need it equal to 0, and we need it in descending order. Okay? So does it matter which side I put it on, left or right? When I'm solving quadratic equation way, do I care? I don't care. When I'm factoring, what has to happen? The x squared must be a positive, okay? When I'm doing quadratic, I don't care. Do whatever you want. But what are you typically better at, positives or negatives? Typically positive. So where do we want to move everything on this question? Let's go to the left, okay? So 4x squared plus 12x minus 6 equals 0. Tell me you're fine, okay? Again, if this was a test or a quiz and I didn't tell you which way to do it, we would take out our GCF and we'd try to keep factoring. I'm going to save you time. This one doesn't factor other than that. So you have to use the quadratic. So what's A? 4. B? 12. Oops. C? Negative 6. So you write down your formula. X equals negative B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. You're going to write it down every question until you have it memorized. Okay? If you run out of room, you've got the backsides blank, okay? So I'm going to fill in or substitute everything I know. Negative B is going to be negative 12 plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Please check that you did it right with mine. Sorry, I don't really have an eraser, but this will do. I have one, it's just annoying. Hey, come on in. Is it open? Hello. Yeah. Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, just tell me. Okay. I don't care. Whoever you need. Do you want them to come to me? I can do both if there's room.
No, because I was going to talk to Nikki.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll just do Faye. It's fine. Thanks. No problem. Okay, so make sure you wrote it right. Okay? What did I say? I said Finn's class, right? Yeah. Okay, remind me. I'm not going to remember that. What am I doing? Okay, so we need to finish this. I should. There's a way to pause it, but I was afraid I'd screwed up, so I didn't pause it. Anyway, if you're watching this video, sorry. No, I just put it on. I don't care.
I went to go watch one the other day, and I was like, hey.
I don't have time for that.
Me and Hallie talking.
I don't have time for that. No.
Oh, that's going to be on there.
Okay, here we go. So to solve these things, you use PEMDAS or GEMS. How many of you ever did GEMS? Did anybody learn that way? Did you? Okay, I honestly think GEMS is probably better. PEMDAS is fine, but GEMS, so PEMDAS is parentheses exponents, right? GEMS, the G stands for grouping symbol. So in Algebra 2, that's going to come in more handy than PEMDAS did. So PEMDAS stands for parentheses. None of these are really parentheses. I know that it looks like they are, but parentheses would be like that. That's parentheses. You understand? Something I can actually do, right? All these other ones are just kind of like placeholders. These were really multiplication. That was really multiplication. They weren't parentheses. Do you understand what I'm saying? So grouping symbols are parentheses like this. You can have brackets sometimes. You can have absolute values, or you can have square roots. These are grouping symbols. You have to do those first, okay? So again, don't work ahead. I know you're tempted, don't. And try not to use, oopsie, plus or minus. Try not to use a calculator if you can help it too. I can go ahead and say that's 8. It doesn't really affect anything. But parentheses, grouping symbols, and then you start over again. I do PEMDAS again. So exponents come first. What's 12 squared? 144. And then pause, okay? I find what the sign is going to be. This is a negative times a positive times a negative. What is that? A positive. And then don't do the signs anymore. You're done, okay? And then 4 times 4, 16 times 6. And you can use a calculator now if you want to. 96, good. Everybody okay so far? Okay? And then obviously you take the 144 plus the 96 and you get, what is it? 240, thank you, over 8. So in Algebra 1, it wasn't too bad to get to here, okay? You did simplify square roots in Algebra 1, but that was always like the hard part that you usually don't remember. So from here, in Algebra 2, this is where I really start to leave people in the dust, and I don't want that for you. I'm going to break this down because this is a concept that you should have mastered by now. If not, I'm not saying like too bad, see you next year. I'm saying I can't reteach you simplifying square roots in class, but you can come and see me during WIN. It take like 10 minutes and I can show you how to do it. So you just go ahead and write down what we do, but I don't have time to reteach you a whole lesson in class. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? So you aren't allowed to forget anything I say in this class ever, is what I'm telling you. Okay? So you could go back and watch a video if you want, or you could see me in a WIN for like 5 or 10 minutes and I can reteach you simplifying square roots. But you've got to come and see me or it's not going to go well. Okay? So, simplifying square roots. What's the highest perfect square that goes into 240 evenly? This is where you probably would use your calculator now. So you divide by 4, you divide by 9, you divide by 16, 25, 36, 49, da-da-da, right? 16. And it's going to be 16 and 15. Good. So what is the square root of 16?
4.
So negative 12 plus or minus 4 root 15 over 8 so far. Are you okay? What do I do now? Pizza, the pie, whatever one you prefer, right? Bless you. What do they all have in common? A 4. So what do I get? Negative 3 plus or minus?
2. No, 1.
1. So I don't need to write it. So square root of 15 over 2. This is what we call an exact solution. Okay? Because I didn't round. I know you used your calculator, but you didn't really. You didn't say like negative 3 plus this is that, right? That's an exact solution. Sometimes they say round your answers. So if they said that, you're going to get out your calculator, which you bring with you every day because it's a math class, or your cell phone if you're not bringing your calculator. Okay? You're going to take negative 3 plus the square root of 15, and then what do? No. Equals, and then divide by 2. 0.44. I think they usually round to the nearest hundredth. So you get about 0.44. Those squiggles means I rounded. Okay? You try the negative part, the negative 3 minus da-da-da. Let's see what you get. Just shout it out when you get it. 44 again, yeah. Negative 3.44. Everybody take your time and get those two answers. If you're not getting it, please let me know. Okay? The reason you have to hit equals before dividing by 2 is if not, your calculator thinks you're just dividing this by 2 and not the entire numerator or the entire quantity by 2. So you really have to be careful when you plug these things in.
If you put it in parentheses, would it work?
Yes, it would. But most people don't think about that. But pick one. I don't care how you get it right. Just get it right. If you have, who has a calculator that does the i's? Does anybody have that in here? That one? You could put yours in as just a big old fraction with a plus sign and then the minus sign. Either way. No calculator has the plus or minus sign. You have to do the plus and then the minus. Even the $100 graphing calculator ones don't do that. So you just do the plus answer and you do the minus answer. Okay? So that's the answers. So let's go to like what that means. If I were graphing it, it would be a parabola, a U. It would open up because it's a positive on the square. And it would cross the x-axis at about 0.44 and about negative 3.44. So it would look something like that. There's no way we could have done that without the quadratic formula.
Do we have to show that?
No, I'm just trying to tie it all together. Nope, they just asked you to solve it. Okay, the next one, number 19. Same thing. What's it say? 12x squared. Is it plus 9x minus 2? Is it? Thank you. What's the problem with it? Not equal to 0. What do you want to do? Add 17. I want you to understand with quadratic formula, it doesn't matter if it's negative, positive, whatever. You can't screw it up, but most people prefer positive x squared. So I'm going to add the 17 to the left side. 12x squared plus 9x plus 15 equals 0. What's A? B? C? All right, you try to substitute it into the quadratic formula without me. Write down your formula, substitute, and pause. Check it with mine. When you're ready, check it with mine. And then we'll do the math together. Yeesh. Everybody good? That's the easy part, right? But if you screw up anything, it's wrong. So really make sure you know the formula correctly and you take your time plugging it in, okay? So now let's actually do it. Negative 9 plus or minus. What's 9 squared? 81. What sign does all this get? 1 minus sign, and then ignore it. You're done with that. And 4 times 12 times 15. You can use a calculator for that. 7 what? Well, okay, don't do the sign again, right? Just do the 720. You already did the sign once. Over 24. Is everybody okay with that? And then what's 81 minus 720? Yeah, that's right, negative 639. I'm going to pause there. Okay? So far, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not rocket science. You got to be careful, but you plug in the formula, you use your calculator, it's not that bad, right? In Algebra 1, we would have said, oh, no real solution, you can't do it. In Algebra 2, that's not an option anymore. We can always do it because we are wiser and older, and we can do it now, okay? So what do I do? You have to take out the I. In the other class, they're like, that comes back again? I said, yeah, it doesn't go away. So now you totally can do it. You have to break down the 639. I try to see if it's a perfect square first. I assume it's not. But you could try. That'd be kind of nice, right? It's not. So you break it down. You find the highest perfect square that goes into 639 evenly. You divide by 4. You divide by 9. You divide by 16. You divide by 25. Everybody should be punching buttons. What goes into it? Should have found it by now. 9 does. What's left over? 71? Isn't 71 a prime number? Or we feel like it is, right? Once you get a prime, you're for sure done. It's not a rule that you have to have a prime, but if you get a prime number, you've found your highest one. You're done, okay? So we have negative 9 plus or minus 3i square root of 71 over 24. Now what? We're hungry. Pizza or pie? Which one do you want? Okay, great. Divide everything by 3. That's their GCF. They have a 3 in common, right? So it's negative 3 plus or minus I square root of 71 over 8. Thank you. This is the only answer we can get because I is an imaginary number, so you don't have like 2.7. It doesn't work that way. It's an imaginary number, so you keep it that way. There is no rounded answer. So what that means, this was a parabola that opened up. So It didn't cross the x-axis anywhere. It's a parabola that opened up. We have imaginary answers, but you can't graph those in this class right now. Okay? We don't do it in here. Never mind. You don't graph imaginary answers. Okay? So, tell me that the idea of that was easy. Okay? Do you see how easy it is to screw it up? Right? So if you can factor, do you see that most of you can factor most things within like, I don't know, 10 or 15 seconds? Right? So if you can factor it, you probably want to if there's a 1 in front. If you can factor it, you probably want to. If not, then this is your other option. Okay? So before we actually go to the discriminant part, I want you to come up with the answers on your own. I don't want you just to memorize it. I want you to understand that you already know it. Okay? So I'm going to go back to this answer, the first one that we did. The discriminant here is 240. You don't understand that yet, but it is. This was a positive number, right? How many answers did I get? 2. Were they real or imaginary? Real. Were they rational or irrational? Rational is like 1/2. Irrational is like 1.7524, blah, 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 right? Irrational, right? Let's go to the other one. My discriminant was this. Again, you don't understand that yet, but it is. How many answers did I get? No. 2. What kind? Real or imaginary? Imaginary. Can you kind of think to yourself, like, how I know what kind of answers I'm going to get just by the discriminant? If I had under the square root sign, blah, 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 okay? If I had 4, okay? Would I get real or imaginary answers if I knew the rest of this? Real, because it's positive, right? Would I get how many of them? 2, plus or minus. Would it be rational or irrational? What do you think here? Why do you think rational? Because it's a perfect square. 4 is a perfect square. If I had 13, it'd be 2, real, irrational, okay? Blah, 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 blah. How many would I have? 2. Real or imaginary? Imaginary, because? Excellent. You just told me the rules. So instead of memorizing something, unless you're good at it, you just understand it, right? The discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. That's I guess you could call it an equation, a formula, right? What do you notice about that? It's the part that's under the square root sign. See that? But you don't actually take the square root of it. The discriminant, if I say it's 4, it's 4. It's not 2. Don't take the square root. Do you understand what I'm saying? The discriminant is what goes under the square root sign without actually doing it. Okay? So if you have a positive under the square root sign, you have real answers. You're going to have 2 of them, and it's either rational or irrational. It's rational if it was a perfect square. It's irrational if not a perfect square. I would write that down. Yeah, Q stands for rational. It's over here on the side if you forget. Okay? If you have a negative under the square root sign, you're going to get complex or imaginary. So this is the first time I think you've heard the word complex. Complex is the same as imaginary. Okay? And you're going to get 2 again. The only time you get 1, oh, by the way, complex can't be rational or irrational. It's not a real number. Okay? The only time you get 1 is if there's a 0 under the square root sign, because what's the square root of 0? 0. So isn't plus 0 and minus 0 the same answer? So that's the only time you get 1. Okay? So, down here, they ask you to find the discriminant. So we're going to do b squared minus 4ac. They ask you to tell them what type of roots and how many you're going to have. I don't ever make you find the answer, because if I'm going to have you actually find the answer, couldn't you just find the answer and work backwards and say what kind of answer you had and not really understand what the discriminant meant? Do you understand what I'm saying? So when they ask you for the discriminant, they're basically saying, hey, I don't want the answer. I just want to know what kind of answer I'd have if I felt like finishing the problem. They're telling you to do half the work. Those are the ones we like. Okay? So is this in order? Yes. So we're going to find the discriminant, which is just the b squared minus 4ac. Okay? So b squared is going to be negative 3 squared minus 4ac. Is that okay? I'm just substituting, right? So I end up with what? 9 minus, no, it's 24 times 4. 96, which is, take 9 minus 96. Use a calculator if you want, I don't care. Negative 87? Is that what you said? So my discriminant is negative 87. That's part A. Okay? Anybody confused by that? Okay. Part B, how many answers am I going to get? 2, because it's a plus or minus. Are they real or imaginary? Imaginary, because if that negative is under the square root sign, I'm going to get imaginary. So that's my only option, is 2 imaginary, or complex, if you want to say that, I don't care. That's part B. Is that okay? For the sake of time, let's just jump to number 39. I'm going to tell you that on 28, you had to add the 9, your discriminant was 0, so what would you get? If we go ahead and at least write this down, discriminant was 0, so how many answers would I get? 1, real or imaginary? Real. Rational or irrational? Rational. Okay? All right, now go ahead and try that last one. I'm going to write it down here so you can actually read it. If you get it, just go ahead and shout it out. Anybody think you got it? Mm-hmm. 13.48. Everybody get 13.48. Ask me if you didn't. You had to subtract the 4.8. A was 0.6, B was 1.4, C was negative 4.8. Plug it in. Where I get A, B, and C from? Or the answer? You would say, oh, no, I just told you what would happen. I didn't actually do it. Sorry. So would this be a real or an imaginary answer? Real. How many? 2. Rational or irrational? Most of you don't know, so take the square root of 13.48 and see if it's pretty, basically. Not pretty, right? So irrational. Asking you a question. Are you sure? Again, this wasn't solving, but on the top when we solved it, if you can factor, it's usually 2 seconds, right? So if you only use quadratic if you have to. I don't use it unless I have no other choice, personally, okay?